My name is Faustina, 32 years old, and 6 months ago I moved back into my childhood home after my divorce. I wanted to save money for graduate school while rebuilding my life. I worked full-time, contributed to bills, and still managed to help around the house. But lately, something had changed. Dad seemed distant, my stepmom Diana more cold than usual. Still, I put my heart into preparing our Christmas dinner, never imagining what my father would announce during our family meal. If you've ever had your family turn on you during what should be the happiest time of year, let me know where you're watching from and subscribe to hear how I turned this heartbreaking moment into the best decision of my life. Before everything fell apart that Christmas evening, my life had been following a completely different path. I had built what I thought was a stable life in Chicago with a promising career in marketing. I had met Tyler during my senior year at Northwestern, and after 3 years of dating, we got married in a beautiful ceremony that my dad had helped pay for. He seemed so proud that day, walking me down the aisle, giving a touching speech at the reception about how his little girl had grown into an accomplished woman. Tyler and I settled into married life easily. We bought a small but charming condo in Lincoln Park, adopted a cat named Mochi, and spent weekends exploring the city or hosting dinner parties with friends. My career was taking off at a digital marketing agency, where I had recently been promoted to account manager, handling some of our biggest clients. Then just past our 4th anniversary, everything collapsed. I discovered text messages on Tyler's phone from his coworker Jessica. At first I tried to convince myself it was nothing serious, just friendly banter between colleagues. But deep down I knew. When confronted, Tyler confessed to a 6-month affair. He claimed it had started as just friendship during late nights at the office, then drinks after work, and eventually, well, I didn't need all the details. The divorce was quick but devastating. Tyler didn't fight for the marriage, which hurt almost more than the affair itself. We sold the condo, split the proceeds, and divided our possessions. After attorney fees and settling our joint credit card debt, I was left with significantly less savings than I'd expected. Around the same time, the agency lost a major client, and layoffs followed. With my relatively senior position came a higher salary, making me an expensive employee to maintain during downsizing. I received a decent severance package, but suddenly I was divorced, unemployed, and feeling completely unmoored. That's when my dad suggested I move back home to Westbrook, Pennsylvania, a small town outside of Pittsburgh. He said it would give me a chance to regroup, save money, and figure out my next steps. I had been considering going back to school for my MBA, something I'd put off during marriage, and this seemed like the perfect opportunity to make that happen. When I first arrived at my childhood home 6 months ago, things seemed fine. Dad and Diana welcomed me, helping carry my boxes into my old bedroom, which Diana had maintained as a guest room since marrying my father 10 years ago. My father, Warren, had been a widower for 5 years before meeting Diana at a community fundraiser. My mother had died of breast cancer when I was 15, and while I missed her terribly, I had genuinely wanted my father to find happiness again. Diana had 2 children from her previous marriage, Jason, who was 28 and worked at my dad's construction company, and Lily, who was 17 and still in high school. Initially, everyone made an effort. Diana prepared my favorite childhood meals that first week. Lily seemed excited to have a big sister figure around, and even Jason made conversation at dinner, asking about my life in Chicago. My dad and I agreed that I would contribute $300 monthly toward household expenses while I looked for a job locally, which seemed more than fair. I found work as a marketing coordinator at a local real estate company within 3 weeks, taking a significant pay cut from my Chicago salary, but grateful for the steady income. The problems began gradually. First, it was small comments from Diana about the extra electricity and water usage. Then Dad mentioned that perhaps I could increase my contribution since I now had a job. I agreed, raising it to $500, though my salary was modest. I was still trying to save for graduate school while paying off the last of my divorce lawyer fees. As weeks passed, Diana's warmth cooled considerably. She stopped including me in meal planning, would wash everyone's laundry except mine, and would often make pointed comments when I was home late from work about people who don't respect family dinner time. Dad seemed increasingly uncomfortable around me, especially when Diana was present. I began noticing tension between them after I'd leave a room hushed arguments I couldn't quite hear. When I asked Dad if everything was okay, he'd brush it off with a quick, "Just business stress." I knew his construction company had been struggling with rising material costs and labor shortages, but I sensed there was more to it. Jason became increasingly hostile. Once when I was helping Dad review some personal finances at the kitchen table, offering suggestions from my business background, Jason walked in and immediately tensed up. Later, I overheard him telling Diana that I was trying to take over everything and getting too involved in family business. His resentment seemed to stem from fear that I was threatening his position as the son working in Dad's company. Meanwhile, my financial contribution to the household had somehow crept up to $800 monthly after several conversations with Dad about shared family responsibility. I was now paying for all the groceries in addition to this contribution, plus filling up Dad's truck with gas whenever I noticed it was low as a way of thanking him for letting me use it occasionally for errands. Despite these tensions, I remained focused on my goals. I researched MBA programs, took online prerequisite courses in the evenings, and saved every penny I could. I maintained a positive attitude, believing this was just a temporary situation. I even started a small side business doing social media management for local businesses to supplement my income and build my portfolio. Thanksgiving should have been my warning sign. The dinner itself was pleasant enough with Dad carving the turkey I had helped Diana prepare. But midway through the meal, Diana made a comment about how the house felt so overcrowded these days and how she missed having privacy. Dad nodded slightly, avoiding my eyes. I pretended not to notice, changing the subject to Lily's upcoming school dance, but the moment stayed with me. As Christmas approached, I threw myself into making the holiday special. I decorated the house when everyone was at work or school, hung stockings for everyone, including Diana's children, and spent my lunch breaks shopping for thoughtful gifts within my budget. I found vintage fishing lures for Dad, remembering our trips to the lake when I was little. For Diana, I bought a silk scarf from a brand she had admired in a magazine. For Jason, concert tickets to his favorite band, and for Lily, a set of professional makeup brushes she had been wanting. I believed that with enough effort, I could smooth over the growing tensions. I thought a perfect Christmas might remind everyone that family supports each other through difficult times. I had no idea that the holiday would instead become the breaking point. I woke up early on Christmas morning with a sense of excitement I hadn't felt in years. Despite the underlying tensions in the house, I was determined to make this a Christmas to remember. I slipped downstairs before anyone else was awake and started the coffee, then arranged all the presents under the tree, making sure everyone's gifts were displayed prominently. I had spent hours wrapping each present carefully, using beautiful paper and handmade gift tags. I had even prepared a special breakfast casserole the night before, which I now slid into the oven to bake, while the family opened gifts. When everyone came downstairs, there was a moment of genuine warmth. Lily squealed with delight at the pile of presents. Dad smiled as he poured his coffee, and even Diana seemed pleased by the festive atmosphere. Jason arrived last, looking sleepy, but offering a rare smile when he saw the cinnamon rolls I had placed on the counter, remembering they were his favorite. The gift exchange went better than I could have hoped. Dad seemed touched by the fishing lures, actually giving me a tight hug and murmuring, "You remembered." Diana admired the scarf, wrapping it around her neck immediately. Lily was ecstatic about the makeup brushes, and Jason seemed genuinely surprised that I had remembered his favorite band. Their gifts to me were nice too, if a bit impersonal, a department store sweater from Dad and Diana, and gift cards from the siblings. The morning passed pleasantly as we watched Christmas movies and nibbled on appetizers I had prepared. I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop for the tension to return, but it seemed like maybe, just maybe, the holiday spirit had worked its magic. In the early afternoon, I started preparing the more elaborate parts of our Christmas dinner. I had volunteered to cook most of the meal, partly because I enjoyed cooking and partly because I wanted to contribute. Diana had insisted on making her special mashed potatoes and apple pie, which was fine with me, anything to keep the peace. By 5 o'clock, the dining room table looked like something from a magazine. I had used Diana's best tablecloth and china, polished the silver candlesticks that had belonged to my mother, and arranged a centerpiece of pine branches, cranberries, and white candles. The turkey was golden brown, the sides were keeping warm in the oven, and the whole house smelled wonderful. Dad opened a bottle of expensive champagne, a Christmas tradition, from when my mother was alive, and we all toasted to family and health. For a moment, looking around at everyone's smiling glasses raised, I felt a surge of hope. Maybe everything would be okay after all. Maybe I had been overthinking the tensions of the past few weeks. We sat down to dinner, passing dishes around the table, complimenting the food, engaging in light conversation about neighborhood Christmas lights and Lily's upcoming school musical. I was just starting to relax when Dad cleared his throat, setting down his fork with a decisiveness that immediately made my stomach tighten. "Faustina," he said, his voice unnaturally formal, "your mother and I need to discuss something with you." Diana wasn't, my mother had never tried to be, and Dad had never referred to her that way before. The strange formality made me instantly alert, but nothing could have prepared me for what came next. "We think it's time for you to find your own place," he continued, not quite meeting my eyes. "You've become a burden. Your presence is straining our marriage. You need to find your own place after New Year's." The words hit me like physical blows. A burden, me. I had been contributing financially, helping around the house, trying so hard to be considerate of their space and routines. I looked around the table in shock, trying to process what was happening. Diana's face showed a poorly concealed satisfaction, a slight smile playing at the corners of her mouth. Jason looked uncomfortable, but remained silent, suddenly very interested in his plate. Only Lily seemed genuinely upset, her eyes wide and filling with tears. "Dad," I finally managed, my voice shaking, "I don't understand. I thought the arrangement was working. If there's an issue, we can talk about it. Is it money space?" "It's not up for discussion," he replied, still not meeting my gaze. "Diana and I have made our decision. We need our home back. You're 32 years old, Faustina. It's time you stood on your own 2 feet again." The injustice of it burned. I had stood on my own 2 feet for years before my divorce. I had only come home because Dad had invited me, had assured me it was the best solution while I got back on my feet, and now, on Christmas of all days, they were throwing me out. "I see," I said quietly, fighting back tears. "And this couldn't wait until after Christmas dinner." "We thought it was best to be clear before the new year," Diana interjected smoothly. "So you have time to make arrangements." I noticed them exchange a look, a small nod passing between them, and suddenly I understood. This wasn't a spontaneous decision. They had planned this, had decided to blindside me at Christmas dinner, perhaps thinking the holiday setting would prevent a scene. The realization felt like ice water in my veins. I looked down at the table I had set so carefully, at the food I had spent days preparing, at the family I had been trying so desperately to please, and something inside me simply broke. Without another word, I placed my napkin beside my barely touched plate, stood up and walked out of the dining room. No one called after me. As I climbed the stairs to my bedroom, I could hear the soft clink of silverware, resuming conversation, gradually picking back up as if nothing had happened. I closed my bedroom door quietly, then sank to the floor, my back against the wall, and finally let the tears come. Through the floor, I could hear laughter from the dining room, Diana's voice clear above the others. They were having Christmas dinner, eating the food I had cooked, using the table I had set, while I sat alone, shattered by their casual cruelty. That night, curled up in my childhood bed, I cycled through every emotion: shock, humiliation, grief, anger, betrayal. How could my own father ambush me like that? How could he call me a burden after everything I'd contributed? Why had they waited until I had poured my heart into creating a perfect Christmas? As painful questions swirled through my mind, one thought gradually solidified, cutting through the emotional chaos. Something didn't add up about this situation, and tomorrow I would figure out exactly what was going on. The next morning, I woke to an unusually quiet house. My eyes were swollen from crying, and for a brief, merciful moment before full consciousness returned, I didn't remember what had happened. Then it all came crashing back, my father's cold words at the Christmas dinner table, the calculated humiliation, the casual resumption of festivities after I'd left the room. I checked my phone 9:30. Normally, even during holidays, someone would be making breakfast by now. The coffee machine gurgling, dishes clinking. Curious. I ventured downstairs to find a note on the kitchen counter in Diana's handwriting. Gone to after Christmas sales with Warren and the kids. Back around 3. They had gone shopping without even telling me, another pointed reminder that I was no longer part of the family unit, if I ever truly had been. Rather than triggering fresh pain, this realization brought a strange clarity. I had several hours alone in the house, time I could use to understand what was really going on. On impulse, I headed to my father's home office. I had never been one to snoop, but these were extraordinary circumstances. Dad had always kept household financial records in the bottom drawer of his desk, a habit from when my mother was alive and they managed their finances together. The drawer slid open easily, not even locked. Inside were neatly labelled folders: utilities, mortgage, insurance, banking, taxes. I hesitated only briefly before pulling them out. If I was truly such a burden, I wanted to understand exactly how my presence was affecting their finances. What I discovered made my blood run cold. First, I reviewed the household expense summaries my father kept. According to his own records, my monthly contribution of $800 plus groceries and occasional gas fill-ups amounted to nearly 70% of the household expenses, not the 60% I had estimated. I wasn't just helping out, I was carrying the majority of the household costs. Next, I found bank statements for their joint checking account, the one I deposited my contribution into each month. There were regular transfers out of this account to my father's business account, labelled simply as capital investment. I cross-referenced the dates with my own bank records and realised with growing horror that these transfers happened within days of my deposits. My father was using my housing contribution to prop up his failing business. Even more disturbing was a printed confirmation for a 7-day Bahamas vacation package for 2 adults scheduled for February, paid for using that same joint account. The total was nearly $4,000 money that included my contributions meant for household expenses. I sat back in my father's office chair, mind racing. I wasn't a burden, I was a resource, a steady stream of income they had come to depend on. The strain I was causing wasn't on their marriage, but perhaps on their ability to use the house as their personal ATM. If I moved out, they would lose my significant financial contribution. But why ask me to leave then? It didn't make sense until I found one more document, a refinancing application for the house. They were trying to take equity out of the property, but the application noted current occupants included an adult child, which apparently complicated the approval process. They needed me gone, not despite my financial contribution, but because my very presence was preventing them from accessing more money through the house. My hands shaking, I carefully returned everything to its proper place and went back to my room. I called my best friend Jenna, who had moved back to our hometown a few years earlier after her own divorce. "They did what?" she exclaimed after I explained the situation. "On Christmas, after you cooked the whole damn dinner." The validation in her outrage was exactly what I needed. "It gets worse," I said, and told her about my discoveries. "That's financial exploitation," Jenna said firmly. "You need to get out of there, Faust. Not because they want you gone, but because you deserve better. Come stay with me until you find a place." Her immediate offer of support brought fresh tears to my eyes, but these were different, a release rather than an expression of pain. "Are you sure I don't know how long it might take to find an apartment? My spare room is yours for as long as you need. We'll figure it out together." With Jenna's support, I began forming a plan. First, I logged into my bank account and stopped all automatic transfers to my parents' joint account. Then I made a detailed list of everything I had contributed financially over the past 6 months, totaling nearly $8,000, far more than reasonable rent would have cost in our modest town. I researched available apartments near my workplace and found several within my budget, though they would require application fees and security deposits I hadn't planned for. I also discovered a part-time MBA program at the local state university extension that offered evening classes with a scholarship specifically for women returning to education after life disruptions, perfect for my situation. By the time I heard cars pulling into the driveway around 2:30, I had compiled a complete exit strategy. I had also packed my essential belongings ready to leave that day for Jenna's house. As I folded clothes into suitcases, I felt a strange mix of emotions: grief at another loss of home, anger at the betrayal, but underneath a growing sense of determination and even liberation. I was no longer the shell-shocked woman who had retreated from the Christmas dinner table in tears. I was someone who had uncovered the truth and was taking decisive action. For the first time since my divorce, perhaps even before that, I felt completely clear about what I needed to do. I could hear them downstairs unpacking shopping bags, exclaiming over purchases. No one called up to check on me or even seemed to notice I was still in the house. I continued methodically packing separating items into what I would take immediately and what could wait until I had my own place. About 30 minutes later, there was a knock at my bedroom door. My father entered without waiting for a response, his eyes widening slightly at the sight of my open suitcases on the bed. "What are you doing?" he asked, his tone suggesting I was overreacting. "Exactly what you asked," I replied calmly. "Finding my own place. I'm going to stay with Jenna until I secure an apartment." He frowned, looking uncomfortable. "There's no need for such a dramatic response, Faustina. We didn't mean you had to leave immediately. After New Year's would be fine." His casual dismissal of the situation, as if he hadn't completely blindsided and humiliated me just the day before, made something snap inside me. I set down the sweater I was folding and turned to face him fully. "Dad, let's be honest with each other for once. You called me a burden at Christmas dinner in front of everyone after I spent days cooking and decorating to make the holiday special. That wasn't a casual suggestion, it was a calculated humiliation." He shifted his weight, not meeting my eyes. You're being too sensitive. Diana and I simply feel it's time for you to move on with your life. I agree completely, I said, surprising him. I pulled out the notes I had made earlier. But before I go, I think we should discuss the household finances. His face changed instantly, a flicker of alarm replacing the condescending expression. What are you talking about? I've been reviewing my contributions to this household. According to my calculations, and confirmed by your own records, I've been covering 70% of the household expenses, not including the groceries I buy and the maintenance I do around the house. You went through my private papers, he sputtered, deflecting. Yes, I did, I admitted without apology, because something about this situation didn't add up. Why would my presence be such a burden when I'm contributing so substantially? That's when I discovered you've been transferring my housing contribution directly to your business account. His face flushed red. That's a temporary arrangement. Business has been slow and I also found the confirmation for your Bahamas vacation with Diana. $4,000 from the joint account I pay into scheduled for February. Funny definition of burden-sharing dad. Diana appeared in the doorway, obviously having been listening. How dare you go through our things? That's a complete invasion of privacy. Her outrage would have been more convincing if it hadn't been mixed with obvious panic. How dare you call me a burden while using my money to bail out Dad's business and fund your vacations? I countered, my voice steady, despite the anger burning inside me. I was never a burden. I was your personal ATM. My father's expression had shifted from indignation to desperation. Faustina, you're blowing this out of proportion. We're family. Sometimes family members help each other out. I agree completely, which is why I was happy to contribute to the household within reason. But what you've been doing isn't reasonable, it's exploitation. And it ends now. I've already stopped all automatic transfers to your account. The colour drained from my father's face. You can't do that. We have bills due next week. Bills that I've apparently been paying the majority of for 6 months. I think you and Diana can manage to cover your own expenses for a change. Diana stepped forward, her face twisted with anger. After everything we've done for you, taking you in when you had nowhere else to go, this is how you repay our generosity, with accusations and selfishness. I laughed, I couldn't help it. Generosity. You charged me more than market rate rent for a bedroom in a house that's nearly paid off, used my money to fund your lifestyle and Dad's business, then had the audacity to call me a burden and kick me out on Christmas Day. That's not generosity, that's financial abuse. A movement in the hallway caught my attention. Jason stood there, clearly having overheard much of our conversation. His expression was confused, processing the revelations about my financial contributions. I thought she was living here for free, he said to my father. You told me she was barely contributing anything. Another lie exposed. I turned back to my father, whose face now showed panic. Faustina, please, let's discuss this rationally. He begged, his tone completely different now. If money is tight for you, we can adjust your contribution. You don't need to move out. We didn't mean what we said yesterday. It was just holiday stress talking. The rapid backpedaling confirmed everything I had suspected. It had never been about me being a burden, it was about access to my money. I'm not interested in adjustments, I said firmly. I'm moving out today. I'll come back for the rest of my things once I have my own place. But what about your contribution for January? The mortgage payment is due on the 5th, Diana sputtered. I looked at her with genuine pity. My worth isn't determined by what I provide to this family. If that's all I've ever been to you, a source of income, then I have nothing more to say. I zipped up my suitcase and lifted it off the bed along with my laptop bag and a small duffel of essentials. Jason stepped aside in the hallway, still looking stunned by the revelations. As I headed downstairs, my father followed, still protesting. Faustina, you're making a mistake. We can work this out. Family sticks together. I paused at the front door, turning to face him one last time. You're right, Dad. Family should stick together. Family should support each other. Family shouldn't call each other burdens during Christmas dinner or use each other as financial resources without consent. When you're ready to be actual family again, you know how to reach me. With that, I walked out the door to where Jenna was waiting in her car, just as we had arranged by text. As I loaded my bags into her trunk, I could see my father standing in the doorway, looking suddenly smaller and older. Diana hovered behind him, whispering urgently in his ear, likely already strategizing how to cover the bills without my contribution. I felt a pang of sadness for the relationship I had thought we had, the father I had believed him to be. But as Jenna pulled away from the curb, that sadness was quickly replaced by something unexpected, a profound sense of liberation. My first night at Jenna's apartment was a strange mixture of emotions. After we unloaded my bags into her cozy spare room, we sat on her balcony with glasses of wine, and I finally allowed myself to process everything that had happened. "I still can't believe they did that to you," Jenna said, shaking her head in disbelief. "At Christmas dinner of all times." "I can't believe I didn't see what was happening sooner," I admitted. Looking back, there were so many signs. The way Dad kept increasing my contribution, how Diana would make comments about expenses whenever I used anything in the house, even though I was paying for most of it. The betrayal still stung sharply, but there was also an unexpected feeling of relief. For months, I had been walking on eggshells trying to please people who saw me only as a financial resource. There was freedom in no longer having to try. My phone buzzed with a text message. To my surprise, it was from Jason. "I had no idea you were paying so much. Dad always made it sound like you were getting a free ride. I'm sorry I didn't speak up yesterday. I hadn't expected any support from that quarter." Jason and I had never been particularly close, his resentment of my relationship with Dad creating a wall between us. His acknowledgement, while small, felt significant. The peaceful moment was interrupted by my phone ringing, my father's name flashing on the screen. When I didn't answer, he called again. And again. Eventually, I put my phone on silent, watching as the missed calls accumulated. "He's panicking," Jenna observed. "He just realized his cash cow walked out the door. And that his mortgage is due in a week," I added, feeling a twinge of guilt that I quickly suppressed. My father was a grown man who had made his choices. It wasn't my responsibility to rescue him from the consequences, especially after how he had treated me. The next morning, I woke to 17 missed calls from my father and a series of increasingly desperate text messages. "Faustina, please call me back. We need to talk. I think there's been a misunderstanding. Diana didn't mean what she said. You're always welcome here. Please reconsider. The family needs you. The family needs you. Not I love you, or I miss you, or I'm sorry for hurting you. The family needs you," as if my only value was in what I could provide. I sent a single response: "I need time. Please respect that." Then I blocked his number, needing space to think clearly without his manipulations. That day, I submitted applications to 3 apartments I had researched, using some of my savings for the application fees. I also registered for the scholarship program at the local university, feeling a flutter of excitement at the thought of finally pursuing my MBA. By the end of the week, new challenges had emerged. Diana had apparently been calling mutual acquaintances and extended family members, spreading a story about how I had abandoned the family after they had generously taken me in during my time of need. My Aunt Carol called, concerned about what she had heard, and I had to explain the real situation, feeling embarrassed to admit how I had been taken advantage of. Financial reality also set in quickly. Without the drain of supporting my father's household, my budget was actually more manageable, but the initial costs of establishing my own place security deposits and furnishings would still strain my savings, which I had hoped to use for graduate school. Emotionally, I cycled between anger, hurt, relief, and determination. Some moments I would find myself in tears mourning the father I thought I had, the family support I had believed in. Other times I felt a fierce pride in having stood up for myself and refusing to be exploited any longer. Jenna was an unwavering support, giving me space when I needed to process alone, sitting with me through tearful evenings and celebrating small victories. My coworker Marcos, who had always been friendly but now stepped up as a true friend, offered practical help, lending me his truck when I found a second-hand desk on sale and needed to transport it to Jenna's apartment in preparation for my studies. The first real test came 10 days after I had left, when I encountered my father at the local grocery store. I had just turned into the produce section when I saw him examining apples, looking noticeably more disheveled than his usually meticulous self. When he spotted me, he immediately abandoned his shopping cart and approached. "Faustina, thank God, I've been trying to reach you." "I asked for space, Dad," I said, quietly aware of other shoppers nearby. "We need to talk about your return," he said, his voice carrying enough that a woman selecting tomatoes glanced over curiously. "Diana and I are willing to forget the whole thing if you'll just come back and resume your contribution. Things are tight right now with the business and always about money. Not my well-being, not repairing our relationship, just his financial needs." Something hardened inside me. "I'm not coming back," I said clearly. "I've signed a lease on an apartment. I move in next week." His face flushed. "You can't do this to the family. We're struggling without your help." Several more shoppers were now openly watching our exchange. I kept my voice calm and even. "I'm sorry you're struggling, Dad, but I'm not responsible for supporting your household. I paid far more than my fair share for months, and in return you called me a burden on Christmas Day. We're done." I walked away, leaving him standing there as whispers spread among the witnesses to our confrontation. Though my heart was pounding, I felt strangely powerful. I had stated my boundaries clearly and stood my ground. The apartment I found was small but perfect, closer to work and within my budget. It had good natural light for studying and just enough space for the essentials. The day I moved in, Jenna and Marcos helped carry my few belongings up to the second floor, and we celebrated with takeout pizza on my new, second-hand sofa. That evening, after they had left, I stood in the middle of my tiny living room and felt a sense of ownership and pride I hadn't experienced since before my divorce. This place was mine alone. No one could take it from me or make me feel unwelcome in it. It was the first step in rebuilding my life on my terms, not as an extension of someone else's. The following week, I started my first graduate course, diving back into education with enthusiasm and determination. Balancing full-time work with part-time studies was challenging but invigorating, giving me less time to dwell on family drama and more focus on my future. Throughout it all, one unexpected source of support emerged: my father's sister, Aunt Rachel, who called after hearing conflicting stories about what had happened. Unlike others, Odette, who had accepted Diana's version without question, she asked for my side and listened without judgment. "Your father has changed since marrying Diana," she said sadly. "The brother I knew would never have treated his daughter the way he treated you. I'm so sorry, Faustina." Her acknowledgement of what I had experienced, her willingness to believe me, was a balm to my wounded spirit. It reminded me that while some family ties had been damaged, perhaps irreparably, others remained strong and true. 3 months passed in a blur of work, study, and rebuilding my life. My small apartment had become a true home, decorated with second-hand treasures and brightened by plants. I had developed a routine, working during the day, attending classes 3 evenings a week, and spending weekends studying or occasionally socializing with the new friends I had made in my graduate program. Through the grapevine of our small town, I heard that my father's business was facing serious financial difficulties without my indirect support. A major project had gone over budget, and he had been forced to lay off 2 employees, including, ironically, Jason. Diana, who had not worked outside the home during their entire marriage, had been forced to take a part-time job at the local department store to help make ends meet, a development that apparently caused significant tension in their relationship. Their much-anticipated Bahamas vacation had been cancelled, the deposit forfeited. According to Aunt Rachel, who still kept me updated, despite Diana's attempts to turn her against me, the mortgage payment had been late, twice incurring penalty fees that further strained their finances. I took no pleasure in their struggles, but I did feel a certain vindication. The burden had turned out to be a crucial support beam, and without it, the structure was crumbling. Jason and I had developed an unexpected connection. After losing his job at my father's company, he had reached out to me initially to apologize for his silence during the Christmas dinner incident, but then to ask if I knew of any job openings in the marketing field. I had put him in touch with a contact at a local construction supplier who needed help with their social media presence, a part-time gig that eventually became a full-time position. Our relationship, once strained by competition for my father's attention and Diana's manipulation, gradually evolved into something resembling friendship. Over coffee one morning, he confided that the atmosphere at home had become increasingly tense. "They fight all the time now," he said, looking tired. "About money, about the business, about whose fault it is that you left. Diana blames Dad for not handling you better, whatever that means. Dad blames her for pushing you away. It's exhausting." "I'm sorry," I said sincerely. "That can't be easy to live with." "I'm looking for my own place," he admitted. "I never realized how much you were contributing financially. They told me you were barely paying anything, that you were taking advantage of them. I feel horrible for believing it." His honesty was healing in its own way, confirmation that I hadn't imagined or exaggerated the situation. It also revealed just how deliberately my father and Diana had worked to isolate me, turning even the other children against me with their lies. Lily had also reached out secretly, texting me from school when Diana wouldn't know. At 17, she was caught in the middle, missing my presence, but afraid to defy her mother openly. "The house feels so different without you," she wrote. "Mum's always angry, Dad's always working or drinking. Can we meet sometime? I miss you." We arranged to meet at a cafe near her school, where she confided her plans to attend college as far from home as possible the following year. I offered whatever support I could, promising to help her research scholarships and applications, maintaining the big sister role despite the fracture with her parents. The most surprising development came when my grandparents, my father's parents, called me unexpectedly. They lived in Florida and had always been somewhat distant. But Diana had apparently reached out to them, asking them to intervene and convince me to reconcile with the family. "Your father says there's been a misunderstanding," my grandmother began delicately, "that you left suddenly after a small disagreement at Christmas." I took a deep breath and calmly explained the reality of the situation, including the financial exploitation and the public humiliation at Christmas dinner. There was a long pause before my grandfather spoke. "That doesn't sound like the son we raised," he said finally, "but it does sound like the influence of that woman he married. We're sorry, Faustina, we had no idea things were so bad." Their acknowledgement meant more than I could express. Throughout my life, I had been taught to respect my elders, to not contradict family narratives, to keep private matters private. Breaking that conditioning to speak my truth was terrifying, but ultimately liberating. Professionally, things were looking up. My consistent performance and the additional skills I was developing through my graduate studies had caught my supervisor's attention. When a project management position opened up, she encouraged me to apply. To my delight, I got the job along with a significant raise that eased my financial constraints considerably. My new role gave me more autonomy and creative input, allowing me to implement strategies I was learning in my MBA program in real time. The validation of my skills and ideas was a powerful antidote to the erosion of self-worth I had experienced living with my father and Diana. With Jenna Marcos and my new graduate school friends, I began building new holiday traditions. For Easter, we had a potluck picnic in the park instead of the formal family dinner I would have attended in the past. I found I enjoyed these casual, chosen family gatherings far more than the tense, performative holidays at my father's house had ever been. Marcos and I had grown particularly close. What had started as friendly workplace support had gradually evolved into something deeper. He was patient, understanding when I explained my hesitation about jumping into a new relationship, respecting my need to focus on rebuilding my life and completing my education. His steadiness was a welcome contrast to the volatility I had experienced with both my ex-husband and my family. 6 months after moving out, I received an unexpected visitor at my apartment. My father, looking noticeably aged and diminished, stood at my door one Sunday afternoon. "Can we talk?" he asked, his voice lacking its usual confidence. Against my better judgment, I let him in. He sat awkwardly on my sofa, declining my automatic offer of coffee, looking around at the home I had created without him. "The business is in trouble," he said finally. "The bank is threatening foreclosure on the commercial property. I need help, Faustina. Just a loan to get through this rough patch. I'll pay you back with interest, I promise." No apology, no acknowledgement of the hurt he had caused. Just another request for money. The predictability of it was almost sad. "I can't help you financially, Dad," I said gently but firmly. "My resources are committed to my education and my future." His face hardened. "So that's it. Your own father asks for help and you turn your back on him after everything I've done for you." "What exactly have you done for me, Dad? Since Mum died, you invited me back when I was vulnerable, then exploited me financially, lied about me to the family, and humiliated me publicly. Tell me what part of that deserves my financial support now." He had no answer for that, just angry sputtering about family obligation. I remained calm, neither raising my voice nor backing down. Finally, when it was clear I wouldn't be manipulated or guilted into giving him money, he left, slamming the door behind him. I expected to feel devastated, to cry or fall apart. Instead, I felt an overwhelming sense of clarity and peace. I had faced my greatest fear, confronting my father directly without yielding to emotional manipulation, and I had survived. More than survived, I had maintained my boundaries and my dignity. That evening, I sat on my small balcony watching the sunset and reflecting on how much had changed in just 6 months. The pain was still there, the sense of betrayal and loss, but it no longer defined me. It had become part of my story, a chapter rather than the whole book. Diana still refused any contact or acknowledgement of wrongdoing, maintaining her narrative of my abandonment and ingratitude to anyone who would listen. But increasingly, people saw through the facade, especially as my father's financial problems became more public. My life was moving forward on a path entirely of my own making. I was excelling in my graduate studies, advancing in my career, developing new relationships, and building a home that truly reflected who I was. For the first time since my divorce, perhaps even before that, I felt fully in control of my own destiny. The irony wasn't lost on me being called a burden and kicked out of my childhood home had turned out to be the catalyst for the most empowered period of my adult life. Sometimes rejection truly is redirection, pushing us toward the path we were always meant to follow. 1 year after that fateful Christmas dinner, my life had transformed completely. I had graduated from the MBA program with honors, leveraging my final project into a promotion to marketing director at my company. The salary increase allowed me to buy a small but charming condo in a nice part of town, my first real estate purchase since the divorce. My relationship with Marcos had deepened into something serious and stable. Unlike my marriage to Tyler, which had been built partly on youthful infatuation and societal expectations, this relationship was founded on mutual respect, shared values, and genuine understanding. Marcos had been there through my darkest moments of family betrayal and had celebrated every triumph along the way. The most significant change in my family situation came unexpectedly. 3 months earlier, Diana had moved out, filing for separation from my father. According to Jason, who had maintained contact with both parents while establishing his own boundaries, the financial strain had been too much for their marriage. She couldn't handle the lifestyle adjustment, Jason explained during one of our now regular coffee meetings. When they couldn't afford the Bahamas trip or her salon appointments or dining out 3 times a week, she started blaming Dad for everything. Eventually, she just packed up and moved in with her sister in Pittsburgh. My father, humbled by both business failures and his marital separation, had reached out again this time with a different approach. There were no demands for money, no accusations, just a simple message: "I miss you, Faustina. I was wrong. Can we talk sometime?" After careful consideration and discussion with both my therapist and trusted friends, I agreed to meet him at a neutral location, a cafe downtown. He arrived early, visibly nervous, looking older and more careworn than I remembered. "Thank you for coming," he said, his voice lacking the authoritative tone I had grown up with. We talked for over 2 hours that day. For the first time, he offered a genuine apology, acknowledging the pain he had caused and the trust he had broken. He admitted that Diana had influenced his behavior, but took full responsibility for his choices. "I lost sight of what was truly important," he confessed. "I was so focused on maintaining Diana's lifestyle, on propping up a failing business, that I used my own daughter as a financial resource. I will regret that for the rest of my life." I didn't offer immediate forgiveness or promises of restored relationship. Instead, I was honest about my feelings, the hurt that still lingered, the caution I now felt around him. We agreed to move forward slowly, rebuilding trust gradually through consistent actions rather than just words. Diana never apologized or acknowledged any wrongdoing. She maintained her narrative of victimhood, telling anyone who would listen that I had abandoned the family and that my father had chosen me over her, a complete inversion of reality. Jason and Lily saw through her manipulations now and had established their own healthier boundaries with her. As Christmas approached again, I felt a mix of emotions. The holiday would always carry the echo of last year's trauma, but I was determined not to let that define the season for me going forward. I decided to host a small dinner at my condo for my chosen family, Jenna Marcos, a few close friends from work and graduate school. After much consideration, I also invited my father, making it clear that this was a step in rebuilding our relationship, not an immediate return to the way things had been. The day before Christmas, I finished decorating my home, a blend of treasured ornaments from my childhood that Aunt Rachel had saved for me, and new traditions I was creating. The tree was smaller than the one in my father's house, but it was mine. A symbol of the life I had built from the ashes of betrayal. As I hung the last ornament, my phone rang, Lily's name appearing on the screen. "Merry Christmas Eve," she said cheerfully. "I just wanted to check what time I should arrive tomorrow. Dad's picking me up on the way." "Around 4, I replied, smiling at her enthusiasm. At 18 now, and in her freshman year of college, Lily had blossomed away from Diana's controlling influence. Our relationship had strengthened into a genuine sisterhood, no longer overshadowed by complicated parent dynamics. Later that evening, as I prepared some dishes for the next day's meal, I found myself reflecting on the extraordinary journey of the past year. From the devastation of that Christmas dinner announcement to the thriving independent life I now led, every step had contributed to my growth and resilience. The woman who had sat weeping in her childhood bedroom, feeling worthless and unwanted, wouldn't recognize the confident, successful person I had become. That painful rejection had forced me to redefine my worth outside of family approval or validation, to build a life on my own terms, rather than trying to earn love through financial contributions or self-sacrifice. Christmas Day arrived bright and clear. My small dining table was expanded with a rented table to accommodate everyone. I had prepared a feast, though deliberately different from the traditional dinner of the previous year, a new menu for a new chapter of life. My father arrived first, bearing a small, carefully wrapped gift and an unmistakable nervousness. We had maintained cautious contact over recent months, meeting occasionally for coffee, gradually rebuilding some semblance of relationship. This was the first holiday we would spend together since the previous Christmas disaster. "Your home is beautiful, Faustina," he said sincerely, looking around at the space I had created. "It really reflects who you are." "Thank you," I replied, accepting both the compliment and the gift, which turned out to be a framed photo of my mother and me, from my childhood, something I had thought lost in the chaos of my departure from his house. The gesture brought unexpected tears to my eyes. "I thought Diana had thrown this away years ago." "I kept it hidden," he admitted. "I should have displayed it proudly instead." Others arrived soon after Lily, bubbling with college stories, Jason bringing his new girlfriend Jenna, with her signature holiday cocktails Marcos, with warm hugs and assistance in the kitchen. The apartment filled with conversation and laughter so different from the tense performative gatherings at my father's house. As we sat down to dinner, I looked around at this blend of biological family and chosen family, at the relationships that had weathered storms and those newly formed from the aftermath. There was healing here, not complete or perfect, but real and ongoing. My father, seated opposite me, caught my eye and raised his glass slightly. "To new beginnings," he said quietly. I nodded, acknowledging both the progress and the distance still between us. Our relationship would never be what it was before, but perhaps it could become something healthier, based on mutual respect rather than obligation or financial dependence. After dinner, as everyone gathered in the living room for dessert, I took a moment alone in the kitchen, breathing deeply present to the fullness of the moment. 1 year ago, I had been called a burden and asked to leave the place I thought was home. Today I was hosting Christmas in my own home, surrounded by people who valued me for who I was, not what I could provide. The journey had been painful beyond words, at times a complete dismantling of what I thought family meant and how I defined my own worth. But from that devastation had come a reconstruction stronger and more authentic than what had been destroyed. I had learned that worth isn't measured by what you provide to others, that real family can be chosen, not just born into. I had discovered that setting boundaries isn't selfish, but necessary for healthy relationships, that financial independence enables emotional independence in profound ways. Most importantly, I had lived the truth that crisis, even betrayal, can become the catalyst for powerful transformation. Looking at the old family photo my father had returned to me, placed now on my mantle, alongside pictures of my new life, I felt the integration of past and present. The painful Christmas rejection hadn't erased my history or defined my future. It had merely redirected me toward the life I was meant to live all along. If you've ever been called a burden by those who should value you most, if you've been rejected by family, or used for what you can provide, rather than loved for who you are, please know that it's not the end of your story. It might be the painful beginning of a beautiful new chapter. I'd love to hear about your experiences in the comments below. Have you ever had to rebuild after family betrayal? How did you find your strength? Remember to like and subscribe for more stories about finding power in life's most challenging moments. Thank you for being part of my journey, and may you find peace and purpose in yours.